Hello. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I can't put on my camera. My name is Sonny Enebi. Amara, you are welcome.
Thank you.
How are you? How is my daughter and my grandchild coming?
I'm fine.
Nice to
She's
see
good.
you. Interesting. Eh?
It's a pleasant surprise. I
Very,
just
very
messaged
good.
her right now. It's like, oh, look at you.
Okay.
Uncle Sonny is
Fantastic.
1 year. Fantastic. Yeah.
All right. You're welcome, everyone, to the African Leadership Forum, another edition that we normally have every week to interact and interrogate the political landscape. Today, we have a very, very distinguished, honored guest, and we are pleased to have you in our midst. In the African Leadership Forum, what we try to do is interrogate the space, the political space in Nigeria, interrogate what is going on and how we can improve it, and to help the leadership recruitment process to ensure that the right leaders emerge even from the party stage. And then how do we get the people to be politically aware of what is going on and how they can participate? Today, we have a very, very important person, like I said. His name is Amara Nwankpa. Amara is the Director, Public Policy, right, for the Yaradua Center. Amara, I would like you to further introduce yourself. What do you do at the Yaradua Public Policy Center? How did you get into this space of advocacy? And we'll take it up from there. So let me allow you to sort of introduce yourself, what you do at the Yaradua Public Policy Center, and then we'll take it up from there before we dive into the topic for the day. You are welcome once again. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, as you've said, I'm the for the Public Policy Initiative at the Sheikh Musa Yaradua Foundation. The Public Policy Initiative at the foundation is focused on advocating social justice, prosperity in Nigeria. Our biggest, our main programs or our programmatic focus include climate advocacy, governance and accountability, democracy and elections, gender justice, and national cohesion. I'm a civic technology and public policy expert. I have a passion for evidence-driven policy development and effective governance. My policy focus include climate elections, energy, security, governance, and accountability in Africa. I actually have quite a bit of experience with national and subnational stakeholder engagement, a multi-level policy and programmatic objectives development, in a variety of institutional and governance conferences. I've also been involved in designing and developing digital technologies, especially around governance and national development. I was involved in part of the design of OneGov.net, which is the information technology platforms for Nigeria, and also the national identity management system, especially the network around that. The platform that we designed won the UN Public Service Award in 2013 for first place in Africa in promoting whole of government approaches in the information age. And some of the work we've done with climate at the Yaradua Foundation includes award-winning documentaries. I think Nowhere to Run, for instance, the seminal work on climate change in Nigeria, and won up to 5 awards Africa-wide and around the world. I have a degree in electrical engineering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amara, and thank you for accepting to be on the platform today. You've been in the public space for some time. You've been doing a lot of public analysis and so on and so forth. And I'm sure even though you don't look it, you've been around a little bit. Maybe you need to give us some kind of throwback as to the electoral process in Nigeria as far as you can go. If you can remember what happened in the 50s and the 60s, that would be wonderful. If you can just want to go back to 1999, that will also be acceptable. As to what has been the trend in Nigeria and what do you think the trend is going to be come 2023?
Well, I'm going to focus primarily on voter turnout historically in Nigeria, all the way down to 1959, I think, in fact, 1959 was our highest voter turnout in the country. Many of you will be surprised that there was an 80% voter turnout for the election in 1959. It was primarily a parliamentary election, so we didn't have a presidential system, and people were voting for local representatives that would go to form a government, the Lagos Parliament in Lagos. We had the highest turnout then. Our lowest turnout was when we changed to the presidential system in 1979. We had both presidential and parliamentary elections at the time. I think our turnout then was very close to 34, 35%. And that's where we're headed at the moment. Since 1979, our highest has been 2003, which was 4 years after we returned to democracy, which was the election that gave Obasanjo his second term. But since 2007, voter turnout on for elections in Nigeria has declined progressively. And just to add that voting is actually habit forming. Also, not voting is also habit forming. So what's happening at the moment with Nigeria since 2007 is we are beginning to form the habit of not voting in elections. Okay, looks like we lost Pastor. Are you there?
So why do you sort of think we are beginning to form the habit of not voting? What is responsible for that? And if I may, how can that be changed?
That's a longer discussion. The first thing I would like to point out is that Nigeria is an outlier. So this is actually a unique Nigerian problem if you look at Africa. In fact, even if you look at West Africa, let me see if I can show you something about voter turnout in Nigeria. Let me see if I can show you a bit of information that I have here. So just to look at Nigeria's context a little bit, you can see what we look like in Africa. Sorry, in West Africa, for instance. I want to turn on the slide, just give me a second. Yeah, so this is what we look like in West Africa. And then if you look at, okay, so let me even spend a bit more time here on the West African slide. You can see that Nigeria is the only country that is less than 40% in terms of turnout. In fact, Nigeria and Mali are the only two countries that are below 50% in terms of voter turnout. Other countries around West Africa, the ones around the coast, for instance, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, Liberia, they are in the 70s and high 80s. But Nigeria is the only one in this dark orange right there at 34.8% for 2019 elections. So that tells you quite a lot about just how unique our problem is and how we are an outlier even in the West African context. In the African context as well, we're also an outlier. In fact, if there was a class, if there was awards or some sort of score for voter apathy, Nigeria will win the the award 2 years, 3 years in a row, because if you look at Africa, the last 2 elections in Nigeria are still the least, with the least turnout if you compare to other countries in Africa. So you look at Nigeria in 2015 for the 3.7%, and then of course we beat that with 35.66%, or thereabout, near 35% in Africa. So we're still, when you look at Africa's picture, we're terrible. So it is a huge problem for Nigeria. And if we were to focus on just the 2019 elections in terms of numbers, you look at the sheer numbers that we have in terms of people who registered to vote, people who went through the process of actually getting themselves on INEC's voters register, 84 million. INEC claims, and we're not sure about this, but you can still use that figure and say almost 73 million people collected their voter cards across the country. There were 11.2 million uncollected PVCs in the country as at 2019. Now that number has increased to 20 million uncollected PVCs. And to put that number in context, 20 million is greater than the number of votes that was garnered by the winner of the 2019 elections. And so it's a very bleak situation that we find our voters' interest in the elections in Nigeria. And the picture is not uniform across the country as well. If you look at the map for the 2019 election, you can see there were only 3 states that actually beat the 50% mark. But if you look across the North, especially in the Northeast, there's a huge habit of showing up for elections, even if it is not more than 50s, compared to in the Southeast or in the Southwest, where you have lighter numbers. In the North Central, the story is slightly mixed, but you can see that different parts of the country have different attitudes and approaches to showing up for the elections. Just to put this in context as well, people say they want to vote. 79% of people who were interviewed before the 2019 elections, and this is from the Election Network that did quite a bit of work surveying voters prior to the elections. 79% of these voters said, you know what, I'm very likely to vote. But on election day, only 35% of them showed up. So there's a drop-off between when, pre-election, when people have an intent to vote, and what actually happens on election day. And we need to interrogate precisely what happens between when people say what they want to do and what they actually do. One number that pops up, and I think people point to it a lot, it has to do with violence. 4,000 people have been killed since 2006 in elections. I do have my doubts about the impact of violence on voter turnout, because some of the places where we've seen the most violence has been also the places where you've had higher turnouts. So, there's also debate of whether the higher incidence of violence have to do with higher turnouts and not that, they discourage voters from showing up. But just to, close the conversation, I think to go straight to Uncle Sonny's question, 57% of Nigerians believe that no matter who wins the election, things do not change very much in Nigeria. So at the end of the day, you have a situation where even if people go through all of this process, they decide to vote, they go through with it, they brave the violence, they cast their ballots, maybe it counts, maybe it doesn't count. People don't think that it makes any difference. There's a bit of, you can answer some of this with, if you look at some of the data that, this particular infographic was from Daily Trust. I think Ali Gedam, he did quite a good job of just giving us a picture of how the trend has been going since 1999. And you can see the gap between the number of registered voters and the number of people showing up continues to widen. And the off-season elections, for instance, are no better. They are just hovering around the same amount of, or the same percentage of turnout. However, what I would like to point out is some of the reasons that were adduced for voter apathy. One is failure of politicians to fulfill their campaign promises, bad governance, which probably we've heard so many times, fielding of unpopular candidates, and then, of course, insecurity. So I'm just going to stop there and wait for another question. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, can hear you, Pastor.
You can hear me, okay. Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned a few things when you were talking that people, maybe some of the reasons for the apathy is perceived, the perception by people that no matter who they vote for, things don't change in Nigeria, bad governance, fielding of the wrong candidates, and so on and so forth. What then do you think Nigerians should do, or what do you think knowledgeable people should do to address this situation? And do you honestly think that things don't change in Nigeria and we have had a lot of bad governance and failures here and there? What's your opinion, or is that correct? And why is that so? Why is it that we seem to be getting the wrong kind of candidates all the time, and things not changing in this country?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that question by telling you what has changed about the electoral process in Nigeria over the last, since 1999. And then I'm also going to answer what hasn't changed. Because again, this question is still open. I don't think I can do justice to it in its entire effect, voter behavior. And I think that one of the things that we haven't done very diligently in Nigeria is to study voter behavior. And particularly because maybe the political class and government institutions do not really value the knowledge associated with understanding the voter and understanding who the voter is and what the voter would, how the voter decides the actions that they take. But to answer the question about what has changed, so for instance, election access has changed since 1999. The process is a bit more complicated to access the polling units. So we've introduced biometric registration, we've introduced biometric accreditation, we've introduced the need to get a PVC in advance. That PVC has to be distributed by INEC, it has to be printed in batch. We've introduced so many innovations into the process to try and make it more credible. But on the flip side, the other side of it is that the process is a bit more complicated. So it could be frustrating for so many people, and also a more complicated process might be unwelcoming. Another thing that's changed is we've adopted more technology, and I'm not saying increased adoption of technology is bad. It's, in so many ways, it can be a good thing. But when technology is adopted in a way that it's not aligned, there's something in technology, and this is my background, we talk about change management. The technology that you adopt, you have to go through a process of change management to ensure that the users of technology are conversant enough with the technology to be able to take full advantage of it. We're adopting technology for technology's sake, and we're not going through the change management process of making sure that all the various interests and users and stakeholders that are affected by this technology are conversant with it and are comfortable with it. You can exclude a lot of people, and sometimes people who you exclude by virtue of technology will not be comfortable enough to confide in you and say, look, I really don't get it. Because a lot of people find there's a shame attached to not being able to do some stuff, but they just stay away. Again, there's so many things that are competing with the attention of voters on election day and even around the elections. People can afford to do other things on election day. In fact, if I check very well, on that Saturday that we're going to have the elections in 2023, Arsenal will be playing, Manchester United will probably be playing, Liverpool will be There's so many things that, you know, give people immediate release and incentivize voters and compete with their attention compared to election day, compared to, you know, when we had in 1999, for instance. Now, the average voter, the profile of the average voter has also changed. Their expectations, their motivations and requirements have evolved over time. They've been exposed to other things. They've been exposed to other countries. They've been exposed to stories and narratives from other climes. And what they expect of the process, what they expect of their leaders, what they expect of institutions have also evolved compared to what is in the past. And it might be that the system has not evolved along with the voters. We've also seen that vote suppression and vote buying have become more pronounced. So we have instances where there's use of security agents, security agencies, and sometimes thugs and armed non-state actors to suppress voters. But also we are seeing a whole lot more of vote buying. And in some cases, you know, there's a tendency to believe that the two work in tandem: vote suppression to keep some people out, vote buying to capitalize on the few that are there, and to increase the margin of victory. One thing I also want to point out that has changed, that might be a good thing and has created a bit of excitement, is the election schedule has also changed for 2023. And this is the first time we have that INEC registration hasn't ended, and we know our candidates, most of our candidates anyway, we know them. And so that has an impact in the kinds of expectations that people have when it comes to the elections. But what has remained the same, and some things have changed and may have affected voters' behavior and may have resulted in voters staying away more from polls. But some other things that didn't change might also affect voter behavior. First thing is selection of party candidates. It hasn't changed. It's still indirect primaries. A lot of times it's a few people, it's monetized, and we know our complaints about this process. The pool of major political leaders or candidates has also remained fairly the same over the time. So people get a sense that, look, we're just doing some sort of, rotation around the same people and the same elements all the time. The mobilization approaches of political parties has also changed as well. In fact, a lot of what happens is ethno-religious sentiments being mobilized in order to tap into our base sentiments. Election violence is still the same. I mean, I know a lot of people think it's worse, but no, I think that election violence has been a consistent feature of Nigeria's electoral process. Now, I agree that bad governance is an issue as well. And bad governance, for me, doesn't necessarily look at just what the leaders deliver. It looks at the role that citizens and the voice of other stakeholders have, especially marginalized. We're talking about groups like women and youth, the role that they have in making the decisions or contributing to the decisions that affect them and their lives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very, very interesting. And you touched on some area. I don't know if this is part of your ambit, if you want to talk about it a bit more. And this issue of the selection process of the party candidate, this issue of the indirect primaries, where it's almost a foregone conclusion. A lot of these so-called delegates have been sponsored by somebody or the other, put in hotels and this and that and all that. What really can be done to ensure a much more credible process that actually votes for competence other than loyalty or ethno-religious sentiments or even compensation factors? Or what should we be looking at? And also there's been this discussion as to whether we're best suited for the presidential system or the parliamentarian system or this and that. And also the conversation around what you may call non-party independent candidates, that we shouldn't go through this party route, that it just further complicates things and makes things very expensive. And then the big question of people paying 100 million to secure a party ticket and so on and so forth. What really is the interpretation of that? Why in the first place do the parties put a bar at 100 million before somebody can offer himself for presidency? If you're offering yourself for service, why would you want to pay 100 million to get in the race? And why, what's the thinking behind it? And what does it mean to us, the onlookers, that somebody who has paid 100 million to get into an office, what signal is that? I mean, PDP, 40 million. Other smaller parties are even saying 20, 25, 30 million because you want to run for president of Nigeria. I just want to hear your thoughts on these things, and I hope I've not overloaded you with too many questions.
No, you haven't. I think these are all very important questions. First of all, what needs to change about the political parties? I think they need to have competition, because right now, there has, up till this 2019 election, there hasn't been major competition for the two major political parties, the main political parties, APC and PDP. In so many ways, their process of choosing candidates have been similar. And so there's no need to change because there's no incentive to change. First of all, someone else is not doing very well. And second, your main competitor isn't doing anything different. And so it's better for you to keep it in-house, keep it controlled, and go for what you call an elite consensus. Now, the decision about how much the forms have to be in order to keep people out, because I think that decision is to exclude people, and you exclude people by raising the barrier of entry. And the higher the bar to enter, the less the number of candidates that you get, and that makes that number manageable. So the approach they chose to do this time around is to raise the bar to 100, which says that there are a lot of politicians who want to be president who have so many millions in their accounts. And even when they raised it to 100 million, you still had up to 23 people or 25 people who paid up that amount and were entered into the race. So they bought the form at that exorbitant fee. However, this is not the only way to limit the number of people who can contest for a certain position. In fact, in other countries, you have mandatory requirements for them to raise a certain number of signatures from registered party members before they can enter the first stage of qualification as aspirants. So there are so many other ways to do this, but the other ways to do it obviously involve giving more power to the party rank and file, which is something that I think neither of the two political parties are willing to do. They are more prepared at the moment to keep the power to decide as close as possible to the top of the party and to the political elite stakeholders of the political parties. And then the other members of the parties who act as delegates are now, of course, vassals to this political elite in the parties. And that process seems to work for them because what it does is that it doesn't allow the system to be disrupted. And if you look at what's happening today with the emergence of two more parties that are in the reckoning for the 2019 elections in terms of presidential candidates, you see that this is the reason why the political elite are afraid. Because if you have a situation where popularity of candidates drives the decision, or the popularity of an aspirant drives the decision where a candidate emerges, there's a tendency that it could be disruptive to the order of the party.
Right. But what do we now do going forward? And as a nation, as a people, what do we do? Is this process of party primaries and delegates, is it yielding the best for us? Are we just going to fold our hands and be looking, or what do you suggest that Nigerians should do collectively to ensure that we get a better result in terms of competence from this present process?
Well, I don't have a solid answer to that. I will just say one thing. I'll say that I appreciate what's happening at the moment with, I believe it's Labour Party, where young people have gone and hijacked the party. I think it's one of the ways to do it is to hijack one party and make it a popular party. You could also sponsor a party that creates competition for the established order. You see, the way power asymmetry works is that power asymmetry will continue to get worse unless it is acted on by an external force. And so if one does not create alternatives, one does not create competition for what is dominant and force that dominant force to make accommodations, then nothing will change. I think that people have tried to infiltrate the parties, two major parties, to try and see if that will work in order to democratize it. I don't think that process has yielded fruit. And so now the other alternative is to take other parties and to pour people's wills into them and to force those parties to be shaped in the character and in the way that will allow for the right kind of candidates to emerge.
Okay, so, and people have said that even this third party option is near impossible, mainly because of the cost thereof of setting up the party, the issue of structure or no structure, and that some third party or big tent, as it has been suggested by some people, cannot work, and that most of these people are theorists anyway, and they're not down to the grassroots. What, in your opinion, do you think, number one, can be used to improve the level and quality of participation in voting and prevent vote buying? You know, people are buying votes all over the place because of the level of poverty and illiteracy in Nigeria. What do you think can be done to ameliorate that and prevent vote buying? And again, looking into your crystal ball, if you have one, how do you think the elections are going to go in 2023?
Okay, so to answer the first question, I'm going to summon a theoretical model. And that theoretical model is Victor H. Vroom has a theory of expectancy, a theory of motivation. So I think that, I mean, the opposite of apathy for me when it comes to elections is motivation. How do you get people to be motivated to take actions that would result in them voting and defending their votes? So I'm just going to summon that theory just to explain the elements of what drives motivation. And maybe then we can apply our minds to how that affects voting in Nigeria. So the theory actually states that anybody or a group of people will be willing and motivated to take a particular course of action if they can answer yes to three questions. The first question is, if I put in more effort, will I get better performance? The second question, which is instrumentality, is if I perform better, will I receive greater reward? And the last question is, do I like the reward? So if the answer to any one of these three questions is no, there's no motivation. In fact, if there was motivation before, the motivation begins to drop off, because at the end of the day, humans are driven by incentives. We are generally economic beings. So we calculate the incentive around the behavior, whether it's a moral, emotional, or remunerative incentive around a certain behavior or a certain course of action. And these are the three questions that we would normally ask. Now, if you look at expectancy, which is the first the first issue. These are the kinds of things that require effort: registration, getting PVC, mobilization of voters. I'm talking about getting people out, voting and protecting the vote. And the factors that affect that are things like having the right resources available, having, so money, tools, documents, time. Registration involves documents, for instance. Time, I think to a degree, has been solved at this time because we have quite a bit of time between now and an election for people to actually make their minds. Having the right skills. There's voter education. There's also canvassing skills. We don't have that many people who have the kinds of skills for ground games to get people out on election day, and also having the necessary support to get the job done, which is having the right kind of information dissemination, which is still a weakness of our electoral process. Community support. We haven't built the culture of building community of support and community of practice, community engagement or encouragement around voting, but also because our process is a little complicated and technical, we need process support. So if you run into a hitch, let's say with registration, transfer of vote, who do you talk to help you through the process? A lot of times people abandon it at that time and don't move any forward because the effort doesn't result in something that is meaningful. If we talk about, instrumentality, it's that people don't see a clear path between their performance and expected outcomes. Now, I'm not saying desired outcomes. I'm actually talking about expected outcomes. So do you trust the people who will take the decisions about the outcome? So for instance, do people trust INEC? And if you don't trust INEC, is the process transparent enough for you to see what is going on? Now, you actually raised the issue of vote buying, and I would just like to draw our attention to the instrumentality of vote buying. If you look at vote buying, it's actually a very transparent process. Someone is out there, the person has money on their hands. They tell you, look, go there, thumbprint, show me the thumbprint. You come out, you get the money. You are watching this happen. If you see somebody do it the first time, you see another person do it, you see that person do it, you too, you go and do your own. And the entire process is transparent. And you can trust the person who will give you that 5,000 naira or that 10,000 naira because you've seen it happen so many times. So that process in terms of instrumentality is far more trustworthy than voting your conscience. Because at the end of the day, if you put your conscience inside that ballot box, you have no idea. You can't trust that this would reflect in the expected outcomes. Now, the last bit is valence. And this is the bit about motivation that talks about incentives. And this is in terms of how we value what is the expected outcome. Do we like it? And it's not a desired outcome, it's actually an expected outcome. So I'm trying to make the distinguish between what is expected and what is desired. Sometimes what you expect is not what you desire. So for instance, you can expect that X will win the election and everything will go bad and become a mess for Nigeria. That's the expected outcome that you have. But it's not desirable. And you don't feel like your vote will make a difference to that expected outcome that you're expecting. So why bother? You feel a sense of fatalism because whatever you do, whether I talk, I will die. Whether I no talk, I will die. So at the end of the day, you don't say anything. Now, again, there's stuff about our social values and our social conditioning as well, because appreciation of outcome can also be a product of our condition. So there are some things that we are conditioned to like and desire. And there are some things that we are conditioned to value, and celebrate. And sometimes those are the kinds of things that determine what we see as desirable outcomes. So when we don't see it there in the ballot box or in the ballot paper that we see in front of us, there's no motivation for us to engage in the process because the process is effort intensive. And so if we have to address voter apathy in Nigeria, we have to speak to each and every one of these individual elements, and we have to try and solve some of these problems. And solving some of these problems would actually require us to think not just in terms of long-term, because I know there are a lot of all of these issues that are long-term issues. Improving governance is a long-term issue, for instance. There are improving political parties, long-term issue. You are not going to fix a lot of these things before 2023. But there are certain things that we can fix before 2023, because we have a unique opportunity to change our voting habits this election cycle. The first reason why this is a unique opportunity is because there's more time. This is the first time since 1999 that we have this much time. In 1999, the primaries were held in January for an election that was in April. The same thing, I think it was in February for the same April election in 2003. This is the first time we have this much time, almost 8 months, between when primaries have ended and when elections have actually, are going to take place. Now, another opportunity we have is before voting has ended, before registration has ended, voters actually know all their candidates. And I think this is the reason behind the sudden rush in some places around the country to quickly register before INEC closes. You're asking people, this registration has been going on for the last 6 months. In fact, it was in the local government for 6 months. You didn't go. And then all of a sudden, because now the primaries are over, the whole place is inundated. There's too many people, more than what the machines were actually, more than what INEC had planned to handle at the time. And this is primarily because of the fact that people now have enough knowledge. The decisions have been taken. We see the pool of candidates, and we now feel like we can influence. So there's that motivation there. Another thing is there's a growing belief that a third force might actually be feasible. And so that idea that there's going to be novelty, something new, something different, something that does not fit the status quo of traditional political parties, it also creates an opportunity because it can draw in a whole lot more people who are looking for something new, who are tired of the old. But we need to invest in lowering the access barriers. So we need to invest in those things I mentioned before, which is in terms of expectancy. We talk about resolving technical problems, process issues. We need to invest in resources. We need to invest in helping people out, setting up clinics to help people get registered, move their votes, relocate their votes if they have to. If their PVCs are lost, help them find those PVCs. If there are issues with their registration, help resolve those issues before election day. A lot of people do need help. By providing this kind of help, we lower the barrier for access to the election because it's still a problem out there. But also in terms of addressing logistics issues, addressing knowledge issues, and addressing what I call the canvassing issues. We haven't really had a culture of canvassing voters in Nigeria. For instance, in Ghana, where I was part of the elections in 2000, there's a culture of canvassing voters. Whereas in Nigeria, we kind of, even in campaigns now, what people do, the politicians, they bus people from their hometowns all the way to a stadium and use them as photo op to show support, and then they bus them home, give them a bit of money, and that's it. There's no process of going to court the voter, understand the limitations the voter has in getting to the poll on election day, solving those problems systematically to make sure that you remove every hindrance between that voter decision to vote and the actualization of that decision. We don't do that much of canvassing. In fact, our process is not designed to consult the voter, it's not voter friendly. We are designing the electoral process to prevent politicians from stealing the vote, but we haven't designed an electoral process around the voter to understand the voter's behavior, what is convenient for him, what timing and so on, what kind of things that attract the voter to the polls. We also need to build communities around civic participation. Election has to be a community thing. It can't be just individuals. We have to, because you see, the process is costly. It can also be dangerous. So, solidarity, community spirit.
Come, Suya, one by Suya.
Okay, just hang on a second. Let me mute some. Okay.
Sorry, can somebody switch off their mic, please?
Okay, I think I have muted.
Please.
I think I was still. So we need to build communities around civic participation. So there's reinforcement of each other. You know, iron sharpens iron. There's people are reinforcing each other in this difficult journey or this challenging journey of civic participation. Apart from that, we need to introduce a variety of participation incentives. Now, there's a lot that's been going on. People have been introducing disincentives for people who don't have PVC. Oh, you know, no salary if you don't have PVC, go home if you don't have PVC. I won't see you as a doctor if you don't have PVC. But I think we need to think of incentives rather. What can we use to incentivize people for participation? You have to compete in terms of incentives. Maybe not in the same way that politicians do, but you need to incentivize participation. And a variety of incentives need to be created, you know, across board, but also we need to incentivize different types of participation in the process. So apart from participation as a voter, you can participate as someone who's helping voters, you can participate as a canvasser, you can participate as someone who's helping people troubleshoot elections, you can participate as a whistleblower. So if you work in INEC, if you're in the security services, for instance, and there's a plan to scuttle the elections or there's malpractice going on, you can blow the whistle on that. You can participate as part of vigilance to pay attention to what's going on, to make sure that nothing bad happens and steals the election. All of those are different kinds of ways to participate in the civic process. In addition to building communities around this and building communities of practice around these behaviors that encourage voters or motivate voters to show up on election day, we also need to incentivize each and every one of these participation to make sure that people get recognized for doing that, they get supported for doing that, they get incentivized, they get something from society, from all of us, from a community that appreciates the effort that they've put in to make this free and fair elections and attractive elections for voters possible. You know, just hang on a second.
Are you trying to share something? Are you through?
No, I'm through. And then finally, our traditional election process has routinely excluded women and youth. Women and youth, in fact, I have been observing elections in Nigeria since 2010. And, you know, so I was in Delta State to observe the Delta rerun, January 2011. I was, you know, several polling units to, you know, 2011 elections, 2015 elections, 2019 elections. I was in Ekiti for 2014 elections. I can tell you one thing from my experience. I have never seen mobilizers for election that are better than women. The best mobilizers I've seen on election day of getting voters to the polls, women. These women bring hundreds, I've seen women bring hundreds and hundreds of voters right out of buses into the polling unit to come vote. But women are given less and less power in our political process. They don't have the power to make any decisions. They don't get, you know, the opportunity to run for office. People don't vote for them. They are restricted to gender roles like, you know, women leader, women wing, and youth as well. Young people make up majority of the electorate, but the people who are running the political parties or who are emerging out of tickets don't represent them. They don't look like them. They don't share their worldview. And so if we are going to increase participation around the elections, majority of our population, which is youth, half of our population, which is women, need to be consciously included, actively, affirmatively included in the process. And like I said earlier, we have time. We have time between now and 2023 to take all of these steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just ask one last question, and then I'll open the floor to people to ask questions, and maybe my co-presenter Sonny may have one or two things he wants to ask also. The question is, you had asked it before, but I don't think you've answered it. The way we're going now, what do you think will happen in 2023 in terms of election voter participation, and if possible, which party is going to win?
I was going to ask you guys this. I had a poll prepared. I would love to ask everyone this question anonymously and see what you think. I don't know, but there are indications that young people are going to turn up massively for the elections, volunteering, participating, and so on. Being that I've been part of this kind of movement before in 2011 with Enough is Enough, I kind of rate it a lot that when young people are fired up and energized about a particular election, it usually makes a difference. It does. And so it might be the unknown factor around these elections. Now, we also have unique trends around the election that I think haven't happened in quite a while. The first thing is that usually in Nigeria, there's always the tendency of religious and religious fairness. So when you have a Northern Muslim in power, you tend to say, well, have a Christian Southerner in power after that, and so on. There's always that perception that this represents fairness. But in this election, you have two Muslims in power, for the major political parties, and the only Christian in the top four is an outsider. So that's also going to throw a spanner in the works, because there will be a lot of people in Nigeria who think that it's fair after having 8 years of a Northern Muslim, to have another a Christian Southerner to come in. And remember that majority of Nigerians do not have any party affiliations. And so it's not going to be a situation where party loyalty trumps all of this wisdom. I think that there's going to be quite a bit of debate and action and reaction over this particular issue, and that might actually play into the elections, especially given some of the experiences across the country that have to do with religion and terrorist attacks and churches being attacked and so on. It's going to be a very huge conversation going into the 2023 elections. A few weeks ago, I had been thinking, look, this is going to be the first election in Nigeria that's going to go to second round. And I've been having a good laugh because there's so many Nigerians who are not familiar with Section 134, subsection 3 of the Constitution. Because if it goes to second round, people will be surprised how the first runner-up is chosen. It's not going to be the way you expect it. It might be the first election that goes to second round, but we'll see. It depends. By December, I'll be far more confident to make a call. But at the moment, the momentum still continues to grow along with the youth. That's where I see the energy, most of the energy coming from.
Right. Is there any other thing you want to do to speak to the subject matter that we probably haven't touched on or asked you, and so on and so forth? Addressing voter apathy. How can we really address voter apathy? How do we ensure that come 2023, there's a massive turnout of voters? How can we push ourselves to the 60, maybe 70% voter turnout, maybe 80? I see Rwanda has almost 98% voter participation. I think that's just simply incredible for a country that has been through so much. There must be something that they're doing right. So what do you think we should do to bump up our voter participation? And how do we ensure, one of the things that they also say is that your votes don't count. Some people are going to stay somewhere and write the results or fiddle with the paper and declare the false listing. So all that is this and that. I know these sort of things have happened in the past, where election results are even known the night before, and so on and so forth. So there's still a few people of that school thinking that, well, after staying in the sun voting, then somebody will go somewhere and just write the results as they want. How do we also prevent that if indeed such a practice has been occurring? So these are the issues that we really want to look at and see how we can listen. And then some people say, don't even mind them. Some people have bought the security forces, ballot box snatching, security force buying, prevention of some people from moving. And then they said some people have even bought the judicial process, that the judicial process has been bought and sewn up. Some people say they've even prepared their legal cases before the election starts. So there's a case and they are ready to file it in any court. They will go and file one court in Abakaliki or file one court in Zungeru, challenging the election results, and they've lined up the cases and they've lined up the lawyers, so they're just waiting. There's that depth of strategization and calculation of the entire process and all that. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, and if you have any other thing you want to throw in there before our people start to ask their questions.
Okay, thank you for this question. Now, one of my favorite parables, I think Jesus told a parable of the unprofitable servant. The guy whose master says, you know what, tomorrow, just put my affairs in order, I'm going to fire you. And this servant, knowing that he was going to be fired, decided to take the record books and started cooking the record books. So he went to the books and said to one person, one of the debtors of his master, says, you know, you owe 100 bushels. Between me and you, let's have a gentleman agreement, make it 80 bushels. This person owes 70, let's make it 60. This person owes 50, let's make it 45. And he did that across board. And then just right before the next day when the master was supposed to fire him, the guy looks at him and says, you are very shrewd. In fact, this is the specific kind of skill that I need. So you know what, I'm not going to fire you again. And Jesus ends that parable by saying that the sons of this world are wiser in their generation than the sons of God. The idea is simple. Just imagine if these people who have prepared their dockets and prepared their plans and their machinery and their structures for the elections, including their judicial approach and the judicial strategies for the elections. Just imagine that politicians have done that. If you want to counter them, you also have to have your plans in advance. And you have to execute on your plans. You can't, because what you are doing is right, decide that you don't prepare, that you don't have a strategy, that you don't invest in that strategy, and you don't make it attractive to all stakeholders, creating incentives for all the people who are going to help you execute that strategy. You can't take that for granted when you have, even if your cause is right and is just before God and man. And so clearly, even if we are going to be doing the right thing for Nigeria for 2023 and countering these politicians, we don't get off by just being right. We have to invest in being right. We have to prioritize getting voters election ready. This means that the 40 to 50 million Nigerian voters who have PVCs who didn't vote in 2019, we should figure out why didn't they vote? What was the challenge? Help fix those challenges, get as many people ready and willing to vote come 2023. We need to engage. The second is there are 20 million PVCs out there uncollected. That's a huge opportunity. We need to find out whose PVCs are those, help them collect them. Make sure that as many Nigerians as possible have their PVCs at hand. They are living close to where their polling unit is. They know where their polling unit is. They know what is expected of them and what it will take for them to cast their ballot on election day. That's the first priority. We need to invest in that. The second thing, and this is to counter, there's a bit of a change in the electoral law. And I must point out that the electoral law 2022 has some really good things in it. In fact, some of it has caught a lot of the politicians, off guard. So for instance, the issue about delegates, we know that, and the issue about, early conclusion of primaries, we know how that has panned out and thrown its spanner in the works. But election result transmission from the polling unit is also going to happen in 2023. In fact, it started in Anambra. It's also happened in Ekiti. And, I monitored those two, and I saw how quickly those results were coming in from the polling units. So we need to incentivize vigilance. So, today, at the moment with elections, the people who are vigilant about election process and the election results are civil society organizations. But citizens can be citizen observers. Every citizen who is a voter can also participate in observing the elections and blowing the whistle or alerting authorities or other stakeholders about what is going wrong with the process. So for instance, if what you observed in your polling unit is not what is reflecting in the INEC database that, the interactive results viewing portal, let people know that there is a difference, there's a discrepancy, raise the alarm. And we need to incentivize people to do that. Apart from incentivizing them, we need to arm them with knowledge. A lot of people don't know what to look for. So people don't know that if your accreditation numbers exceed the number of votes, exceed the accreditation register in the BVAS, that the election is useless. Most people don't know that. But these are things that voters need to be actively educated about. And we have to take this responsibility unconventionally. We can't rely only on civil society to do this. We can't rely, that's traditional civil society organization. We can't rely on the political parties to do this. In fact, the political parties, the major ones, are comfortable with the way things are. They won't want to, rock the apple cart, regardless of how the elections go in 2023. They wouldn't want to change things. We have to take advantage of unconventional structures, women groups, youth groups, labor unions. We have to take advantage of faith-based organizations and begin to create a community about making Nigerians aware, create, voter education, civic education, civic clinics, helping people get ready for the election, not just emotionally, mentally, physically, and economically. Now, in addressing vote buying, I would say that social cohesion practices go a long way. People live in poverty. That's a reality. There are lots of people that are living in poverty and don't see, their situation is so bad that they don't see how this election would help them. And words are wind. You can go and tell them about the future. How many times have they heard that? Many people have gone and promised them that, if they vote this way during the elections, things will change. But most times that, it turns out that, someone's just come there to scam them of their votes and move on. Nothing changes. So at the end of the day, we have to show working when it comes to vote buying, because a bird in hand is better than a bird in the bush. So if they are giving them 5,000, it's better than somebody who has promised you something in 2 years that won't come or might not come and hasn't come before. So if we are going to change that behavior, we have to invest in social cohesion. A lot of us wouldn't go anywhere close to the people who sell their votes. We don't understand their economic predicament. We are not creating solidarity with them economically to understand their challenges. What makes them make those decisions that they make? How do you help them to be less dependent on handouts, on transactional things, and to be to create a far more transformational relationship with you, with your community, with your beliefs, with your ideologies? Because if they have those transformational relationships, they won't go for transactional ones. That's the truth. So we haven't invested in creating transactional relationships, in investing, in incentivizing these kinds of behaviors that we want to see. We expect them, automatically. But the truth is that behaviors are not automatic. People don't do what is right. They do what has incentive and what is easy to do. That's general. That's, that's just the truth.
Okay, let's take some questions from other people. Ayodada has his hands up. Please, 30 seconds, very quickly, quite a few people. Gideon Ataya also, please, 30 seconds also. I think Stephen Lawson has a question, and Kathy Okani. I have those 4 questions very quickly. So Mr. Dada, please unmute yourself and go straight to the question or the comment.
Oh, all right. Thank you very much. From my experience on most of my chats with groups, I find out that the problem is, one of the problems we're going to face are the parents, ourselves, and knowledgeable people. From one of the group chats I have here, when I was actually, kind of propping up the youth's efforts in trying to collect PVC and participation and all that, it says from north, south, east, west, they've been raised on corruption, money, are victims of a system that has neglected them for so long and unfortunately have turned them to the same objects the people they are purportedly trying to depose are. So the issues of blah, blah, blah. So what I'm trying to say is this, that even though the guys are trying their best, but the opposition is coming from the older generations. It seems like they're comfortable with what is going on. So how do we maintain, the zeal, the drive these youths are showing, which is giving the elites, some kind of G3 moment? So that's my question.
Thank you very much. We'll take another question so that we can answer all those questions together. So Gideon, please.
Gideon Odiontaya, I live in UAE. So I just want to ask 2 questions very quickly. The first one is we're having a new system which has not been used for a very long time. So how are we prepared? How are they prepared if there's any breakdown in the system, that we don't have to resort to manual voting when everybody is really prepared for electronic voting? So that's my one question. So our second question is, when you said the people who involved in transactional voting or election, so what do you suggest? Do we have like a group to give them money, or what do we do to really solve their problem? If we know, if we talk to them, they will not listen, they will not understand, because they really have immediate problems. So what do we do? Do we go and have a kind of a group and to give people money, or to what do we do on that?
Thank you very much, Gideon. Thank you. Thank you. Kathy Okani.
Okay. Yes, good evening, everyone. Okay, so my concern is about the plot to disenfranchise a lot of people. We know what happened somewhere in an area where the Igbos are more dominant there. They weren't allowed to register. And then I saw a video yesterday about some people went to vote, to register somewhere in Abuja, precisely. And then they got a wing of it. Someone alerted the Hausa Muslims who came, making calls, and they were threatened. Some of them had to run away, with their car. How are we going to ensure that this doesn't happen? Because a lot of people are willing to register. The positive vibe is very infectious, but is at the risk of risking their life. Is there a way we can beat this? Because we've seen it happen in the last election. Some people who actually registered, they were not able to pick up their voters card because of their names. If your name sounded like you're from some part of the country, your voters card will be given to you. We know that these things happen. What can we do on our own parts, to mitigate against this plan? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. I think those are very strong questions, and I'm sure that Amara is noting them and he will respond appropriately. I'm grateful that the questions are directed at him and not at me. Stephen Lawson.
All right, thank you very much, Pastor Ituah. For the record, Pastor Ituah is my mentor. I'm his mentee. I'm also a word of him, and he's my big uncle. But I want to ask you a simple question. I'm running a project called Your Voters Count with Sam Nwosu. I also have another project that is on African Award with Feitonu Shegu Odeni and Sandra, as well as Peter. My question is simple. Amara, a lot of us are talking about 2023. I'm thinking that a referendum will bring about two options. Whether we would go according to a region aspect, which keeps us together, or we will go our separate ways. All right? The Oduduwa Republic is asking for their own country. Niger Delta is asking. Biafra is asking. Arewa is asking. Middle Belt is asking. What is your projection with regards to all of these interests vis-a-vis 2023? Thank you very much. And thank you, Pastor Ituah.
Thank you very, very much. So, Amara, over to you. Just try and address them very, very quickly, because I suspect a few more people may want to ask questions before we close.
Okay, so first thing first, I think there's a question about the older generation not being very comfortable with what's happening and very comfortable with status quo. The status quo is not good, as you can see. We are last place in West Africa, last place in Africa when it comes to voter turnout. That's a very horrible place to be, giant of Africa. So that status quo has to change. And luckily for us, we have excitement at this time. It's not been like this for a very long time, where young people are fired up. They're using their own money, their own resources. They want to participate in the elections. They want to make a difference. They want to make a change. I'll say we support that. We do as much as possible to maximize the energy. I'll say we do as much as possible support that intent to make sure that that energy doesn't die down, that intent and that desire, the motivation isn't quenched, that we support everything that needs to be done to get people to get their PVCs, to resolve whatever challenges they may have in getting to the polling unit on election day. There's so many challenges, believe me, including logistics. Then you wouldn't believe it, but logistics is a big issue for a lot of voters. I can tell you honestly that getting to the polling unit can be very challenging for so many people. And even sometimes, I remember a rural polling unit I went to in Asaba, in the outskirts of Asaba. People were feeling sad that they left their farms because it meant that they weren't going to make money that day. And it was going to make a huge difference for them. So for a lot of people, missing a day's worth of labor is not something they can afford. And so we have to disrupt the status quo. We have to find a way. We have to ask questions about what is it that is against this trend. And we have to figure out how to solve the problem. And we have to do it in spite of the political establishment because they're comfortable with it. And so that energy is not going to come from them. It's not going to come from government. INEC has tried, and I think we should give them credit for changing the electoral timetable and generating this level of excitement. But at this point, we as the civil society of Nigeria, not just established civil society, but all of us who are the collective body of citizens, need to play a role in making sure that we are turning this tide around and restoring ourselves back to a pride of place in Africa when it comes to civic participation. Now, Gideon talked about technical preparation for the elections. What are we going to do? I think it's vigilance. I think that we need to be very vigilant, ask questions, continue to engage with INEC, ask for tests, and processes for resolving situations. Look at what has happened in Ekiti State, for instance. What was the throughput of those machines? What were the challenges? Ask more questions, demand answers. We have time. If there are any issues, technical issues to be fixed, it's by putting pressure that will fix it. But we can't put pressure if we don't engage. Now, there are a lot of issues with the beavers. We're aware of them. They've been pointed out. Lots of stakeholders have pointed out the fact that sometimes it doesn't recognize your picture, sometimes it doesn't recognize your fingerprints. These need to be addressed. And I think that INEC responds to pressure. And the more we are interested in the process and we engage INEC and we put pressure on INEC, a lot of these solutions will emerge. Who would have imagined that we would have 60 days extension of the voters' registration exercise. It was as a result of pressure. So yes, if we add pressure, if we put pressure, things will be fixed. But we need to pay attention to know what to ask for, because ask and it shall be given unto you. Now, in terms of transactional, what do we do about transactional politics and transactional, voting transactions that people do in terms of buying votes? You have to start by creating relationships. Replace those transactional relationships with transformational ones. Engage with the communities. Let them know you. Go there. Do something for them. Do something that really makes a difference. They appreciate. Yes, it takes you out of your way, out of your regular routine, but it gets people to appreciate a certain different kind of Nigerians. People will appreciate a different kind of Nigerian when they see one. That's what we are learning now, that if your antecedents, your history and things that you do and deliver are different, people will recognize it over time. So it's possible for that to be done. And one of the things that we will learn from NSAS, and I think I've pointed it out several times online, is how the young people from NSAS, for at least 2 weeks, were able to maintain a good relationship with the youths on the streets. I remember that in 2010, when we had our protest, I spoke personally to the head of area boys in Lagos. The guy agreed to provide us security throughout the entire walk. Like, we were afraid that area boys were going to disrupt our march. And when I called him, the guy said, bro, we're there with you. Anything where you want to do, we will give you security, anything, nothing, no shaking. I beg, no even think anything. These people can build relationships with you. I'm telling you, I spoke to him myself. And I was shocked how he reacts, like, look, no shaking. We are there. And throughout the walk, they were there. They called me at 6 a.m. They were already there at Vining, where the march started. And that was an hour before people actually got there, the actual marchers. They were there an hour. And they provided security throughout the entire march. They are just looking to be part of something greater than themselves. And if you give them that opportunity, it will trump whatever it is that the voters are, the politicians are bringing to the table. And we saw that with NSAS. In fact, one of the things that annoyed local politicians in Lagos was that they were calling their people and they weren't answering because they were busy at the toll gate eating rice and drinking minerals that young people have bought for them. So these things can happen. You can grab the attention of these young people away from the politicians. But like I said, you have to create the kind of relationships, the kinds of transformational relationships that attract them to you. Now, Candy talked about the plot to disenfranchise. Now, whereas I believe that there could be plots to suppress the votes of many people, I also think that there is a bit of happenstances and coincidences in what's happening at the moment. The first being that if you look at, in general terms, people from the Southeast haven't necessarily been showing up for elections. So if you look at the map that I showed you, there's been a high rate of voter apathy in the Southeast. But suddenly, there's now a new sense of urgency and a new energy with people from the Southeast to register and regularize their voter status in order to vote for 2023 elections, because there's a dog in the fight this time around. And so what's happening is that you have a high number of people from the Southeast showing up, in a few polling units, a few registration points. So that's the reason that you have a situation where many Igbo people are complaining that they have been denied the right to register. It's simply because there is an influx of Igbo people in very huge numbers to get registered, and INEC wasn't prepared for that kind of thought. INEC wasn't anticipating that people will suddenly wake up and want to register in such numbers at this time in the electoral cycle. Of course, I don't excuse INEC for that. I think they should have anticipated it, and I think they should have prepared for it. But this is what's happening. And INEC is responding. They're throwing more machines at it, but it's taking time because, it's an elephant. It's a very slow process. But still, we need to be vigilant. We need to raise alarm. As you can see, whenever alarm is raised about something and we make enough noise about it, the institution moves, things shake, things change. And so we just need to keep doing it. And if it comes to people's voters' cards being missing, let's trace the voters' cards. Let's not rest. Let's help people. to trace these things until we find out where their voter card is. If it's been buried in the ground, it's been lost, we file a lost PVC request and have it reprinted so they have their voters card back. It can be solved. All of this problem can be solved if we pay adequate attention to it and we have people around. Now, someone talked about referendum and all of that. Now, I'll just say this. I can't comment on whether a referendum should happen. I think that that's outside the democratic scope that we have now. There's no provision in it in our constitution, I must say. But it's also an election issue. If you feel that referendum is one of your issues, then look for candidates, look for legislative candidates that have that as one of the things on their slates and vote for them. When they get to the House, they will be able to amend the constitution and give you what you want. So there is an answer. Don't be looking for shortcuts. There's an answer. Get involved, participate, listen, engage, demand. And then if it's what you want and you want it to be written into the constitution, elect people who will go there and do it for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take one more question or two more questions. Samuel Dada, and then also Anthony Ugebo, and then we'll close. And I'll just get Sonny to take some final comments, and then we will close. Thank you very much. Samuel Dada, quickly your question, and then after you, Anthony Ugebo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mine just like a comment. I remember in 2018, when I came to register for PVC, I went to mainland to speak with some friends and some people that I know. So I was asking their children that I believe they are not up to 18 years, that I just asked them, how old are you? They said, I'm 16. But at the end of the day, they made me to realize that they've been voting for the past how many years? I said, but this is very, very wrong. They said I should go to the north and ask them or tell them it's wrong. And it made me to understand that even the Shama local government, which is under APC, that they make sure that all those underage have their PVC and they give them 900 or 1,000 monthly with 2 dirika of rice, and that they never allow anybody to do PVC in those areas. So under your statistics of people voting in Nigeria, do you consider all those ones? Because I remember in 1993 that when my parents, they placed the paper, they went to their walls, I saw their names. So the people that voted in those years, they were majorly the working class. Even my aunties and brothers, they don't really vote I'm talking of 1993, but in the present days now, people don't really vote. Like you said that in the Southeast, they don't really participate, which is very, very true. So in the recent 20 years back, I've seen that majorly underage do vote, and they are the ones that vote for this APC or all this government in power. What do you think we can do to curb all this act in our electionary system? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anthony, your question, please.
Okay, I just want to make a comment on the question. The comment is, you talked about the referendum and all that people should do what they have to do. But it's a legitimate question the person asked about the referendum, because a lot of people, I should say, don't believe in Nigeria's constitution based on its origin, that it's fraudulent and like a counterfeit document. And I want to also say that INEC, from my experience with INEC, they're not a very clean organization. I mean, maybe pretending. I watched the program with Mr. Okoye, INEC rep, and INEC should understand that try to get the PVC is not rocket science. It's electronic document, the card and all that, and also people should realize that the PVC does not have an expiration date. It's a very powerful identification card, and it's organized probably all over the world, because the barcode behind, when the decoder reads the barcode, a lot of information is in there. So it's a very powerful identity card. So that could be an encouragement for people to go get their PVCs. That's the only ID card I know that doesn't have a special date, not your passport, not your driver license or something else. And that's what I want to say. So bottom line is INEC has some issues. There's no doubt about it. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. New Breed Network, Faye, last question, please. Very last one, please. We will not take any more questions after this. Unmute yourself, Faye, and ask this question.
All right, thank you, sir. My question is, you mentioned that the election might go into second round. and we probably will be shocked at the selection process when he eventually gets to the second round. Can you enlighten us more on the second round process, please? Thank you.
Okay, Amara, over to you. Answer those questions, and then you can take your closing remarks, except if Sonny has one or two things to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Pastor. To some of that issue about underage voting, it is a problem. But it's not the biggest problem that we have. I think the biggest problem that we have is that people who are of age, who have their PVC, are not showing up to vote. It's a big number, 40 to 50 million. And then, of course, there's 20 million uncollected PVCs. There's a whole lot of numbers in there, which, if you put that together, triples the number of people who voted in the last election, and also 6 times the number of people who voted for the winner. So that's a lot. That's a huge, huge, huge number. So it's a big one. Underage voting is a problem, but it's one of those problems that has to do with collusion. And that's why I recommend that we build communities around civic participation, because the people who are trying to steal the election build communities around stealing the election. That's how underage voting works, because it's collusion. People collude together to make it happen, and they form their caucuses and they work to make it happen to deliver a certain result. And if we counter that with our own community of vigilance and community of people who are doing the right thing and who are reporting what is wrong, it begins to roll back the impact and checkmate some of these things, checks and balances. We don't expect that these things all will be cleared, but you need to give it resistance. And we need to come together and give some of these bad practices resistance, so they are not running roughshod over the electoral process. I think Anthony brought back the issue of referendum and the fact that the constitution is fraudulent. Yes, there's a strong argument that Nigeria's present constitution is not autonomous, but it's gone through several revisions by elected representatives and amendments that have been passed to not just the 2 houses of national parliament, but also the states' houses of assembly, who all have been elected as representatives of the people. So at some point, just by pure process, it is being accepted. So even though the origin is not autonomous, its evolution has become autonomous. And so if that constitution can be amended by the will of the people, then yes, we can introduce referendum into it. So it's possible. Things have to be process driven. That's all. In democracy, it's not a dictatorship. You can't say because I don't agree with this, then everybody must follow. We have to have a process for changing things. And at the moment, the best process we have is changing the constitution so that it can allow us to do other things. And so I will still go back to my recommendation of saying, pay attention to those who are going into the parliament, who are going into the state's house of assemblies and the national houses of assemblies. And if you get the right people in there, you will get the kind of legislative agenda that you want. Now, to explain, to answer Newbreed's question about the second round, Section 134, subsection 3 of the Constitution says that, if an outright winner is not determined by the first round of voting, then there shall be another round of voting. And that the individual with the highest number of votes, and then the only other contestant in that second round would be the individual with the highest number of votes in the highest number of states. So not the second highest number of votes. Remember that. You are going to count the number of states that each individual has won. So for instance, if somebody wins 5 states in the Southeast, now remember the Southeast has very low, doesn't have the same amount of population as every, other geopolitical zones. And maybe he doesn't have the second highest number of votes, but he has 5 states in his kitty. And the next person who has higher number of votes than him actually has 4 states won. The person going into the second round is going to be the person with the highest number of votes in the highest number of states. So the person who has won more individual states. So when you have a runoff election in Nigeria, the second position favors people who are winning states outrightly, not necessarily people who are amassing huge margins to themselves. So it doesn't matter if the margins that you use to win your states are like 1%, 2%, 3%, doesn't matter. As long as you had the highest number of votes in those states, it will count, and then we now count the number of states. So that's how you determine the second highest. So it's not by popular votes, it's by votes per number of states won. So if you have a scenario where we have second round, and we have a scenario where the second person doesn't have the second highest number of votes, a lot of people will be confused. In fact, a lot of people will be upset because they would think it's unfair that the person who has the second highest number of votes is not going into the runoff. But the Constitution expressly states that the person who gets into the runoff should have the highest number of votes in the highest number of states. So national spread, as somebody put it, that's what we are looking for. I hope I've answered the question.
All right, thank you so much. Any final comments? Somebody was asking that youth momentum, how do we sustain it? That's Mrs. Adekeye. And is there any intention to create a think tank or body that looks holistically at the challenges and provides a coordinated response as you close?
Well, I think that we need to organize ourselves into communities that support young people and voters in our own area of control or in our own area of influence. Might not be national, it could be one ward, one local government, it could be a state, depending on your resources, but we need to do it. You sustain momentum by providing resources. The more resources you have, the more you are able to sustain your momentum and do stuff. So if people need resources, or if you see people who are interested and who are energetic, ask them what they need. What would they need to be more effective? What help can you provide that would help them to be more effective, and provide it? Sometimes it could be something small. So for instance, I donated recently 100,000 naira to a group of young people who are developing an app around the elections. They needed to raise 450,000 naira for that app. I donated 100,000 to it. It's something small, but it helps. And it encourages people because they see that someone is seeing value in what they are contributing. And therefore it gives them, momentum and motivation to continue. And so look, even if you can't do it yourself, if you can't get involved, provide resources to people who are excited and who are doing it. Ask them what they need, provide as much as you can, and keep encouraging, call people, tell them you're proud of what they're doing. You congratulate them for doing a good job, encourage them, listen to them, listen to their challenges, their frustrations. Some of these things go a long way. Emotional incentives, validation, that people can call and recognize you and say, look, I've seen what you're doing, and I want to encourage you, and I want to pray for you. I'm praying for you, or I'm supporting you, and I just want to know I want you to know that if you need anything, just send me a text message, send me a WhatsApp message. If I can do it, if I can help with it, I'll provide it. All of those things help to keep people motivated and energized going to the elections. It's a collective responsibility for all of us. These 2023 elections, going by what we've seen over the last 7 years, it's a make or break. It's existential for us as Nigerians to fix this problem. And especially in the area where we are dead last in Africa in terms of voter turnout, we need to turn this situation around. We need to change our story, our narrative in this country, and stop being last in Africa. It's not a good place to be. We have to do better. We can do better. The truth of the matter with Nigeria is that we can do much better than we are doing now. We are underperforming. That's what is so sad. We are underperforming badly, and we can do so much better. And young people who are engaged, energized right now, trying to make a difference, if you can't help them, get out of the way. But if you can't support them, do things yourself, organize people yourself. If you have resources, if you have infrastructure, if you have anything that can help, provide it, support, do it. If you can incentivize anyone, support them. It is our collective responsibility. Nigeria is ours. We can all not japa, we can't all leave the country. Even if we do, we will have families still left here. Recently, one of my friends who had traveled, had relatives in the Owo church that was massacred. So, at the end of the day, even when you run away from the problem, it doesn't run away from you, it follows you. So at the end of the day, Nigeria is still a huge concern for all of us, regardless of where we are in diaspora. So even if we can't vote, even if we can't come back to vote, support those who are trying to get voters out. Support those who are trying to get people ready for the elections. Support those who are trying to get people fired up for the elections. And God will bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amara. Since you are giving out donations, I'll send you my bank detail for my own donation. Okay?
No problem, Pastor. No problem, Pastor.
Like we by your knowledge, by your
support your ministry. This is great work you're doing.
I'm sure you will be. We're happy by your contribution, your knowledge and everything. By God's grace, you and I will be engaging, we'll be having personal conversations, and just to see how we can help this process go and get as many people as possible involved in the elections, and hope that we can get Nigeria out of where it is. I do agree with you 110% that Nigeria is underperforming for no good reason other than some people don't want it to perform, and they won't get out of the way. So by God's grace, hopefully 2023, God keeping all of us, God will help us bring about some modicum of change. This is the beginning of change in Nigeria. Thank you so much. God bless you. My greatest love and respects to your family, and also to the good people of Abuja. I want to thank everyone for being on the platform today. You've all been very well. A great audience as always. There'll be a repeat on Zoom. If you missed it, you can go to Zoom in another hour or so, and the program will be repeated there. And you can send it to your friends and let them know. We'll be back on sorry, I said Zoom. I said YouTube. I mean YouTube. I beg your pardon, YouTube. And we will be back Thursday next week, by God's grace, same time on this platform, to try and take yet another very invigorating discussion in trying to set Nigeria in the right place. And if you do know any of the presidential candidates or the gubernatorial candidates that would like to come on the platform, we're willing to engage them to find how they're thinking, which direction they're going, and to interrogate them. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless you. Have a great rest of the week and a lovely weekend ahead, and be good Nigerians. Please go and get your PVC. Read my lips.
Bye, Pastor.
Get your PVC.
Bye, Uncle Sonny. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye. Sonny.
Bye. Pastor. Amara is my in-law. Amara.